Project Vida since 2002 in various roles. First as a mental health counselor, and my current role is as a consultant doing program evaluation and grant writing mostly. So this is one of the projects that I've been involved with from its inception. I wrote the grant to help fund this initially with other people that were part of the project earlier on. So I'm really excited to see it happening in fruition. How we came about to form this project, we were looking at the needs in Cicero and Berwyn. Like Emmanuel said, that's where we started. Looking at new diagnoses of HIV in Latino, gay, and bisexual men, that those were rising. And we saw that there were limited HIV services and limited awareness in the community. So we developed this project, RAICES, which in Spanish means roots. So we were getting at the roots of HIV. So this is, although a lot of this is focused around homophobia and transphobia, ending stigma, but we're really getting at, those are pieces that are really at the roots. So we're intervening at the community level at a lot of different levels, which I'll talk about in a second. And then we expanded to further address transgender needs this year. So these are the different levels that we are intervening in. So the socio-ecological model and stigma looks at how stigma is involved in all of these different levels. So you look at the individual level, like your individual level, how you cope with stigma, mental health, substance abuse, those kinds of issues at the individual level. You get to the interpersonal level, your support system, your family, how you kind of interact with each other. The organizational level, what are the organizations in the community? Are there referral systems to connect people to HIV care or to trans supportive medical care, things like that? At the community level, what about your schools, your churches, your religious organizations, workplace discrimination? So there's a lot of community level pieces, and then around all of that, we're existing in a society that has like gender inequality, different norms about what it means to be male, what it means to be female. These are very rigid concepts in a lot of different cultures. So we're engaging all of these different levels when we're talking about the intervention with RAICES. So this is kind of a culture change. We're working slowly over time to really make this impact so that it sustains itself. So how we came about here. So I'd like to bring Reyna up as well. So Reyna and I planned on co-facilitating this group. We held it in April 29th, earlier this year. We conducted in English. We realized that there's a lot of needs for monolingual Spanish-speaking trans Latinos, and just for simplicity, for the moment, we started with a group in English. It lasted about 2 hours. And as you'll see in some of the analysis that we talk about, a lot of it was friendship networks. I was kind of going through different friendship networks and a convenient sample of who could come to the table. We also did a quantitative survey, and we transcribed the survey, and Reyna and I both independently coded the survey, the transcript. So it was hundreds of pages, as you can imagine. We looked at 7 different themes, which we'll go into momentarily. So we did that independently, and then we came together and had a meeting to really, look at how we both saw things separately and how we saw things independent together, so we could kind of come to that process. You want to say something about how that process works?
Okay. Hi, I'm Reyna Oritz. I'm a proud trans Latina. I volunteer at Project Vida, and I also work with RAICES. I also lead my own independent trans women's group, and we're talking about them. Well, it came to me that we were going to do a focus group, a trans Latina focus group, and we got girls together and we talked about the issues that were so important, and it was amazing. Information that we got was amazing.
Right. Yeah, we'll tell you all about it. So we put up here the different, just some highlights of it, and if everyone didn't get one of these, please take one on your way out. We have plenty of copies, and Emmanuel said you can email them to you as well. So all of the really excellent stories that people had to talk about their experiences are in here in depth. So we can go into who was there. So we had, initially we actually had more people. This is representative of the 8 people that were there that were Trans Latina that stayed for the group. We had some people come that whose English, they couldn't keep up with the English of the group, so unfortunately they weren't able to stay for the group itself. And we had one participant who was Asian, who we didn't put in this analysis because we were focusing on Trans Latinas and really gathering that important piece of information based on the program being targeted to that group. So they were all Latinas that were included in this analysis. Half were Mexican, but we had a wide range: Cuban, Colombian, Puerto Rican, mixed Mexican, Puerto Rican. So we had a lot of different cultures represented, which was awesome. Almost 40%, like 4 in 10, were foreign-born. So we had a lot of immigrants that were part of this group. It was a young group. The average age was 22. Most were male to female transgender, and some identified as female, not as transgender at all. And then some identified as both transgender and female. Half were heterosexual, so back to that sexual orientation question. And 100% were HIV negative, which is actually, statistics nationally range from 14% to 60% in the transgender community for HIV. So I think it was really amazing that the group brought together that no one was HIV positive. And there's a lot of protective factors that I think in this friendship network really support that we'll talk about. So they were mostly from West Side and Southwest Side of Chicago, with some college education, high school education. A lot were unemployed, which is one of the big challenges a lot of trans women face. And a lot were living under the poverty level and under the median income level of what Chicago is. So, next slide, please. So we want to say in particular that these results are not representative. We're not claiming that these stories represent all trans Latinas everywhere, just so that's clear up front. These represent the experiences of the trans women who came, and it's taking a pulse of the community. We do believe that what we're presenting here is the pulse of the community, is real. In our conversations, Reyna talked about having, that this is possible, that that share these stories beyond who's just there, right?
Absolutely.
So we can talk more about the themes. We wanted to start out with the advantages and looking at the assets in the community. So what were the advantages growing up? We asked them what was really helpful growing up. And actually one question we got was, what do you mean advantages? People were like, advantages? How can there be advantages in that? But we did come up with some, and I love this one about self-pride. As long as my loved ones accept me, fuck the world. It really speaks about the importance of acceptance in terms of being able to, have that pride in yourself and moving forward in the world. Mejor sola que mal acompañada. So it's like better alone than in bad company. So really being proud of who you are. And then that empowerment, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Talking about a lot of the negative feedback. A lot of people make fun of me, and that's why I'm so strong. And we talked about this at our last session when we were evaluating and putting things together. Do you want to say more about that? What doesn't kill you makes you stronger?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'd like to say being a transsexual, the main advantage of being a transsexual is that you're living your life the way that you want to live it. And so regardless of anything that goes around and falls apart around you, at the end of the day, we transition to live the life that we wanted to live since we were little. So I think regardless of what that is, the main advantage about being a transsexual. We're walking every day, our lives, going to school, going to work, living the life that we feel we deserve to live. So that's the main advantage about being a transsexual.
Great. And spiritual support. people talked about, I don't feel lonely because I'm with God. So interpersonally, looking at peer support, so not unlike or very similar to in gay and lesbian research about gay and lesbian and bisexual friendships, friendship networks. There's this notion of family of choice. When your family doesn't accept who you are, or you can't be open about who you are, you find other people who can support you. So we saw this as well happening in this group. And I think I wanted to mention this one because it's Thanksgiving next week. One participant said, when I came to Chicago on Thanksgiving, I remember that because it felt like family. I'd never felt a family like that. They treat me like I was part of their family, and that was great. And this was someone who just met someone who was invited to their Thanksgiving. It was like a trans Latina Thanksgiving.
We had last night, speaking of Thanksgiving, we had something with my group. It was called Transgiving, and it was just, and it was beautiful, and it was the girls from my group and a couple of our allies, and we literally had a Transgiving dinner, turkey and kicking and laughing and just being crazy, and it is a reflection of how our family that we've created with our girls, trans girls, is really remarkable, and it's very reassuring to us that we have people that are going through the same things, and we're friends, and we're so close,
Yeah. Great. What's next? So, continuing on the interpersonal level, role models. So people talked about having role models at school. It was like feeling alone until she saw this transsexual or a drag guy at school, and she was like, oh, I want to be like that. It's like, oh, I have an image of what I want to be like. And the family support, there were some positive family support examples where, one participant talked about her grandma, abuelita, like catching her wearing her clothes, like when she was really young, and the grandma was like, oh, you're not supposed to be doing that. So she knew, but this participant felt like she was still shown unconditional love. Her grandma didn't beat her, they didn't kick her out. She was still, accepted, kind of covertly, in a sense. And this example I love as well, that one participant said, I take care of my 2 granddaughters, and they made up their own nickname for her. And later on, in the transcript, she said, they treat me like I'm their grandmother. They know I'm different from other grandmothers, but they give me that respect. They're like, yes ma'am, no ma'am. So I think, looking at kind of the younger generations coming up, seeing that as normal, begin to relate to you as the gender that you're presenting as. And then parental support. One participant said that her mother was her biggest support system ever. I think that's really significant. So we asked where people learned about sex and gender. This was part of the quantitative survey. So about half through social media and internet and friends, a quarter on their own, and 12.5% through family. So a lot of people learned on their own or through friends. So they weren't learning through formal programs in school about what sex and gender means. That's kind of where the gaps that RAICES is filling in. So when you look at the organizational level, one person did have, bathroom use came up a lot throughout this, as you could imagine. There's a lot of national attention to this. For example, the case in Colorado, the transgender girl's parents won the battle for having their transgender daughter, use the girls' bathroom. So one school here in Chicago did that, made that allowance for a participant. And then at the community level, the gay community support. Some people said, they treat me like I'm a queen or something. They felt really good at going out to gay clubs. There was mixed feelings about that, which we'll get to a little bit later. But, and at the society level, there was a lot of discussion around, we're starting to see more people that are trans, like an MMA fighter, mixed martial arts fighter who's transsexual, the author of The Matrix, and RuPaul's Drag Race. So that was a little controversial. How many people have seen RuPaul's Drag Race? Okay, most people in here. So how many of you think that that's like the image that most people get in this culture or in America about, like, oh, that's trans, that's transgender, right? So, yeah, so while some people said it was a good thing, other people were like, well, that's not really presenting what trans is like.
Oh, sure. I mean, it reflects, it shows a different light of like drag, and it's so interesting. But of course, I mean, anybody who really knows that is not, you can't link doing drag to living a life of a trans Latina. To me, it's completely different. But we can get into that another time.
Next one. Okay, so challenges. Unfortunately, there were a lot more challenges discussed than advantages. So one of the really big areas was around defining sex and gender. So defining sexuality and gender terms, like what does that mean? So for a lot of people, and we were talking a lot about this, that when they were first coming out, like they thought, well, I'm a gay boy, like I'm gay. That's what, because I'm different and there's this sexuality thing, and so I'm gay. And then like it's like, oh no, I'm really like born in the wrong gender, and I want to, like I'm a woman. So then, what are you? Are you still a gay boy and a transgender woman? Like, and so reconciling those, like realizing it was a confusing process, and we talked a lot about this earlier.
Sure. I mean, you have to imagine when you're 12 years old and you're coming to terms with your sexuality, who you are, you're kind of listening, you're kind of, society has put all these, you hear gay, 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 gay all the time. So you just, when I came out, I naturally just assumed that I was gay. Because at the time I didn't know, I didn't even know what a transsexual was. So that's why when I first came out, I thought I was gay, but not knowing as time went on that I was really a transsexual. So I think that's where that comes from a lot. When you're younger, you really don't know. So it just leads to, okay, maybe I'm gay. But in actuality, you know that you want to be a girl. So I think in time and education, transsexuals learn really what they are as they grow up.
And then the isolation of that experience and self-censoring and hiding. We had one participant talk about how distressing that was in relationships. And she was as a man, she was in a relationship with women, and she lost her girlfriend because she couldn't come out to her. She thought she was the only one. Some of the older trans women in the group, were realizing this before there was the internet. So it's really, imagine not having the internet. Like everyone, like take out your smartphone and like toss it out the window. Imagine just like you're not that connected to what's going on in the rest of the world. So financially, I talked about kind of earlier, just a lot of people said that they grew up poor. There were challenges with financial status. One person, who was living as a woman, if she couldn't fully change her name because if she switches the license, then her company wouldn't acknowledge the gender change, and they potentially wouldn't renew her license. So there's issues like that come up in discrimination work settings that we need to pay attention to. So that's all just the individual stuff. At the interpersonal level, there was a lot of acts of transphobia by family here. This one person's experience, I came out to my mother when I was 14. Again. So she had come out earlier when she was younger. This was like the second time. I just got all dressed up with all my hidden stuff and my poor mom. She called the police. She didn't know what else to do. Está como un loco. He's like a crazy person. The police came and said, your son's a fag. Way to go, police. Right? How, if this is, who's got your back is really the message that sends, right? Like, who has your back when you're in this experience? So, please. So other family challenges. Now we saw this first one, the grief of the heterosexual dream. We saw this last year when we had a focus group with mothers of gay and bisexual Latino youth, that parents go through this grief process because they have this dream. Who here's a parent? Raise your hand if you're a parent. So just think about what you want for your kids. Think about the dreams you have for your kids. And when that changes, or there's some kind of loss process going on. This, in a big way, when your child is changing gender, it's a whole experience for the parents as well. So one participant talked about that. Another got threatened by our family, and a quarter of the participants here reported rejection from parents about their sexuality. There's a national study that was going on that said 57% of transgender women experience some kind of rejection from their family members. So it's kind of in line with that, with what's happening nationally. Maybe a little less in this report, but it may have just been the people that were there. So, and then there was the whole thing about challenges dating heterosexual men. So, again, this is not representative, and we're not claiming that this is the truth of all trans Latinas. I actually do not believe in love. It's twice as hard for us. Everything is twice as hard for us. Men are pigs. They are dogs. They're in need of sex. I have found some guys, and after a while they leave. So I don't want to waste my time with a male who's just using me for sex. They're not giving me real love or treating me like a real woman, like I want to be treated. Another said, the hardest part is that I date only men who identified as heterosexual. With my relationships now, I think there comes a point when the man has to sit down and realize, I'm dating a transsexual woman. I think that's a little tricky for them because at the end of the day, they see you as a woman, but society sees you that you have a penis, and it gets to them. That's my biggest problem. So some people talked about kind of feeling fetishized, like, you know, ooh, like the trans, like it's just a sexual thing. And people weren't, the men that they dated weren't valuing them fully as women or seeing them as capable of being in a relationship. And then the final example here, participant said, there's a certain market for this right here, and she gestures to her penis and to her crotch. She says, as soon as I told them that more than likely I'll be doing SRS, sex reassignment surgery in 3 years, smoke and gone, never heard from them again. So a lot of people actually talked about that the men that they were attracting wanted them because they still had their penis and they looked like a woman, which presents a whole bunch of different problems.
I think to me that is the hardest thing for people to understand. The majority of people that I come in contact with just assume that a transsexual who has breasts and everything, that they just want to become a sex change, and they just want to become a sex change, and that's like the dream. And I think what he said about the umbrella term transsexual, transgender, there's so many different types of variations of transsexual that you can't just say, you know, all transsexuals are one certain way. There's so many different variations. There's some transsexuals that want to get sex changes. There's some that don't. There's some that want to go to certain levels of their transition. So, I mean, it just goes back to, I mean, everybody's different and everybody has a different, you know. But there is, if one thing you can get out of this is just get that there is so many different types of levels of transsexuals. There's so many different types of variations of transsexuals.
Exactly. So at the organizational level, there were fixed gender roles and bullying. So again, bathrooms came up using, not being allowed to use the bathroom that matched the gender presentation. One person got really bullied a lot. Person who later expressed suicidal ideation. She said she started coming out during 9th grade, and that was 3 years ago. And then the guys in the bathroom were like, "What the fuck are you doing in here? You're a girl," you know. And I mean, imagine going through that every day at school. There's a lot of increased dropout rates with transgender youth as well. 12.5% reported rejection from peers and bullying. So at the community level, back to the police, I was approached at the club the other day, and this motherfucker told me, "Are you a transsexual?" I said, "Yeah." "How does he tell me you have 5 minutes to leave the premises before I arrest you for solicitation? Like, how are you just going to assume that I'm a whore because I'm a tranny?" And at the end of the day, there are undereducated and older men that don't know what the hell's going on. So it really speaks to that need for education for the police force and sensitivity training. And then at the community level, there's another story. I was in McDonald's in my neighborhood with my 2 granddaughters. They're 2 and 4. And all of a sudden this man gets up and says, "You're one of those men with tits." And he just wouldn't get off it. And those girls, they were freaked out. They recognized me as their grandmother, and they know I'm different from other grandmothers. I can defend myself, but people from the neighborhood that knew me got up and defended me. So I think there's great hope in that and power in that of the community and the community support that can be possible amidst transphobia that is rampant in the community. So this fear of violence and hypervigilance, talking about kind of these little things that you kind of always think of, walking around like you're always going to be attacked for who you are. I walk around the train station with my mace in my hand just in case. It hasn't come up yet, but I mean, being transsexual, you have to be aware of your surroundings and your situations, because you don't know who's going to approve it and who's not. You know, who's going to have a problem with that? It's something I think about all the time. It's always on my mind. Imagine feeling that way if you haven't already. I know I feel that walking down the street sometimes. But feeling like you're always going to be attacked for who you are.
Sure. Being a transsexual elevates all that. You can be on the train, you can be on the bus, and just imagine, you know, I mean, it's like you're purple, and you have to always watch out for people making fun of you because you're purple, and they want, you know, it's just different. And you always, I mean, for the most part, and I'm just saying about myself and my friends as well, you know, being in normal life, doing your everyday thing in some way, shape, or form puts you at risk of being verbally assaulted, physically assaulted because you are a transsexual.
Exclusions by gays and lesbians. So this was, there was a lot of discussion around this, and there were different perspectives in the group. But some people experienced that, they said, you know, even to this day, there's an awful lot of animosity in the gay community towards transgender people. Gay men want you to be their toys, and lesbians are scared you'll steal their girlfriends. It's a direct quote. You know, people have these experiences. Some of the gay men would say to one participant, I want to see how you look as a man. Like, take that wig off. Like, it's just something you can take off. So it's really assaultive kind of language. And I would say back to them, I'm sorry, I can't do that because I live my life as a woman. Like, yay her. Right? And then divisions within the trans community. We talked about that too.
Going back to the different variations of transsexuals, there is a divide within the girls, and I think that is as transsexuals that is our biggest obstacle. There's a lot of inner community hatred. You know, she has this, she doesn't, she's different. I think as transsexuals as a whole, that is our biggest issue. Is there is a lot of inner community hatred of ourselves and our sisters. At the end of the day, we all go through the same struggle. We should be on the same level, and we should be helping each other.
And then at the society level, traditional values and religious beliefs and rigid gender norms, kind of things that are embedded in the cultural level, those were pretty prevalent. How being pushed masculine, one definition of masculinity on you really prevented you from being who you were. And the community, you know, someone said, you know, I see some of these things that were going on when I was 20 that are still going on now for kids who are 20. So in some ways it hasn't changed that much, but in some ways it has. The lack of news coverage, people get killed and it's not even in the news. Transgender women are killed and they're not even in the news. Like, we're not even worthy to be talked about in the news. And when they do cover it, they're disrespectful and they're like, you know, him, that's a cross-dresser, they don't use the right language. There's really a real need for that. So we asked about environmental risks. So what are risk behaviors? How does this put you at risk as a trans woman growing up? So I've mentioned suicide before. One participant said, I told my mom once, would you prefer to have a transgender daughter or a son that committed suicide? And I asked her, what made you not do it? And she said, my mom being more open to me. Now my mom is really supportive. It's like, that's the power that parents have in these situations that I think a lot of parents don't know that they have or don't know the consequences of that, of the rejection on the youth. Alcohol and drug use was an issue, criminal behavior, like you have to do everything bad, be like totally bad, and that's, you commit crimes and be violent. to portray your masculinity, kind of overcompensating. Interpersonally, there was violence. Violence showed up in a lot of these. And the family rejection also led a lot of people to homelessness. A lot of people in the group were kicked out after they started coming out. Next one, please. So, what were the service needs? This is what came up with. I'm not going to go into all the details about this. A lot of that's going to be in the report, but 75% reported needing help with those top three things: trans-specific support groups, counseling services, and employment assistance. So those were the top three that really came up. And then the information about sex and gender for themselves and for their parents, and then medical services. So people said, Little Village has a lot of trainees. We should have an LGBT health center in Little Village. The hormone replacement therapy services in the community. Dr. Bell here is going to be on the panel to talk about community services for trans people. And then legal services, housing, food, everything else. So how can we create safe spaces? This is where this whole thing is going. We're not just collecting this information because it's interesting or we want to use it. We want this to be useful to really make community change, including straight allies. So there were different allies, like how do gay men fit into the picture as allies? How do straight women fit into the picture?
To me, growing up, my biggest allies were straight girls. I started transitioning in my early teens. Wasn't blessed enough to find other transsexuals until I was a little bit older. So the allies that I had were straight girls that were cool with me and cool with my transition, and it actually helped me in so many other ways. So, allies, if being an ally to somebody, even though you think we're just being friends, is really vital to this person because she already feels that there's so much against her. And just to have somebody to just be comfortable with and be yourself with is actually life-saving. It's really important.
Yes. And actually, as we're going through kind of the rest of these pieces, we are going to have a panel afterwards. So please save your questions and be thinking. We really want to hear your ideas because this is what we came up with from this group. But we also want to hear your ideas about community interventions, about things that could be helpful to move this work forward. So save those questions for the panel discussion immediately following this. Also, involving the whole family was really important. Latino culture, like family, right? Really important. So it is here as well. So at the organizational level, people talked about developing a support group for trans Latina women that's for trans women. Because there's a lot of groups in the community, especially on the north side, some participants referenced that you get everybody under the umbrella, but there was an important need expressed for, well, what about us as trans women? We need a space for that. Con mis hermanas, my sisters, like all together. That would be culturally and age appropriate. You have meaningful discussion topics involving youth as well as leaders. So it was peer empowerment focused. Transportation assistance and mentoring were all really important components. And Reyna's going to talk more about her group in the next steps part. Next. So at the community level, social marketing, so we're doing, like Emmanuel said with the poster, we are going to launch a social marketing campaign specifically around trans issues in these communities. And the key message was, it's up to us, and it takes time. So keeping those principles in mind I think would be really important moving forward. How can we change views about LGBTQs? Most people said through talking to parents and at schools, creating safe spaces, and social media. So one person said, in response to that, the person who expressed a near suicide attempt, another person said, that's why there should be programs that educate moms and sisters. That's why we need that. And then the public education campaign would be helpful. People recommended us don't preach to the choir. Go to like health fairs in the community. Like when Cicero has their carnival or a kermes or whatever. Like go there and have a presence there as part of the fabric of the community versus going to a place that already accepts you, like going to like market days or something. And some person said, I don't think you could ever really change a person's mind or make them accept. So there's space for that as well. We need to be conscious of that. We aren't going to reach everybody. And then where could we spread the messages? Again, school and social media, those kind of keep coming up. School, social media, and parents and family as really big ones. Next. And then at the society level, policy, how can we increase trans visibility in the media? Like, cover real life stories for trans women. Someone said, like, honestly, when Miss Ketty passed away, why didn't they put that in the news? She opened the doors for other trans women. She knows some more about that.
Yeah, Miss Kitty was a tranny. She was a little older than the rest of the girls, but she helped so many girls. I was 16. I met her I was a speaker at DePaul. Met her. She met my mother, and everybody was comfortable. And she just helped a lot of girls. She helped everybody. She was just such a pivotal person in our group. But I decided, like, everybody's saying, oh, Miss Kitty, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, why aren't we all Miss Kitty? Why don't we help each other? Why do we, wait for one person to run everything? Why can't we all step up and help our own community? So,
it's up to us. All right. Next one. So leadership. I think it's a good theme. This was the last theme here. So there was a support system that was clearly developed in this group, and one of the really great things was that people who didn't know each other before the group, during the group, the focus group, were like saying, oh, there's this service over here, and there's this service over here, and why don't you come to my training Thanksgiving? So there was all that happening just by nature of the focus group. So it was really excellent to see that. Trans leaders as activists. So I want to close this piece of it with this little dialogue here. So someone said, I recall various groups in history that start off like this. I'll name a couple, like the Black Panthers. They were very big. Why can't we do that? And this person says, I nominate you, another person there. You seem like a leader. So there's a nomination for a leader of this movement happening at this group. And the leader-to-be says, who's already a leader in the community, says, we just have to dedicate ourselves. That's what it is. I have to dedicate myself. She says, do you understand that they all came to support this group because I wanted them to know that we can make a difference? I have hope. I just want to be the trans Martin Luther King. I want to be her. And someone said, you try, you have a dream. And she says, I have a dream. And then someone else says, can I be your Coretta? Right? And so there was not only just the leadership within the group, there was like, well, why can't WGN or Channel 9 News like recognize us as leaders that we are. So this is just kind of a culmination summary of what we came up with reading through all of these pages and all these different themes. At the individual level, HIV and protective risk factors, kind of supporting spirituality, support and pride, supporting these pieces for people, allowing space for different trans identities, different bodies, and supporting trans leadership at the individual level. The interpersonal level was building role models, mentoring families of choice, engaging families of origin, learning about sex and gender, reaching heterosexual male partners. How are we going to reach those men who date trans women? How are we going to reach them because there was a need that showed up that was a challenge? Engaging allies. How are we going to engage allies? At the organizational level, how do we combat transphobia in schools, among police, and developing the trans women's group? At the community level, how do we reach the community? So the social marketing campaign is maybe one piece. Put the T back in LGBT. People refer to the T, the transgender, as stepchildren of the gay community. Like, we're not really included in legislation for civil rights, in housing, in the bars. There's not trans-friendly bars. Like, so there's a lot of work within that community as well. Jobs, housing, healthcare, and then at the society level, increasing media and pop culture exposure and dispelling myths of masculinity. So this is just a summary snapshot of what we came up with after all this, and we're really interested in hearing your ideas as well. So Emmanuel talks about the Let's Talk About Sex and Gender training, which was developed by Patricia Canessa, Executive Director of Trans Latina, during last year's project. And just some research that we've shown that conducting this intervention with youth reduced homophobia from pre to post test and reduced transphobia from pre to post test. We gave them a test before and after that session, and their levels of homophobia and transphobia reduced significantly in the pre and post. So we see this as a promising intervention, as a way to come out to your organization or to really work at that organizational level with youth. We're also adapting that to work with providers, to work with teachers, to work with medical providers, to work with other providers who provide just youth services in general in the community, so as to not preach to the choir. There's our lovely poster. And then so the next steps. Bring Emmanuel back up here about the next steps.